that there would be cameras there, and I had taken a day off from work. I called in sick. I was like hiding behind stuff.
And they'll still get you.
No, I was good. It was good
Mm-hmm.
because I saw the cameraman coming.
Mm-hmm.
Shit. And he, fortunately, it was like a quick edit. You could see me like stepping out the frame, but it was enough. So I'm like, okay, all right, he's ready. We're ready, Harry. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the show on WNHH 103.5 FM, New Haven Independent. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Michelle Turner. And as I said, this is the show. Happy Black History Month. Yeah, okay, so we got a month, but we know we celebrate 365. But as long as we have a month, we should acknowledge it. So happy Black History Month. In the studio with me is longtime community activist Barbara Fair. And as if she already doesn't have enough on her plate, she's now coming in to discuss the war against solitary confinement. So, Barbara, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for the invite.
Now, for those who aren't familiar with you, give a little background on yourself.
Well, I came into this life of activism, which is what they call it now. I never called it activism. I just did the work. But I came into this work as a teenager when my brother was arrested and sent to jail, and was my first experience with the criminal justice system. Before that, I knew nothing about it because no one ever went to jail in my family, anything. So I learned a lot around it. So, I was a teenager. My parents couldn't support me because they didn't know anything about it. But, I was scared for my brother. So I found this group of middle-aged white women who had a group they call Citizens for Humanizing Criminal Justice.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them, could I join their group because my brother was in jail and there's so much I needed to know. And so that's how I got started.
How old were you?
17. And one of the biggest things that I remember, because it was a while back, was having we were able to get trailers on the prison grounds, so families could come up and visit their loved ones on the weekends. Of course, that's when we had one prison.
Right.
We couldn't do that today because now it's a full industry.
Yeah.
And keeping families together is not one of their focus.
Yeah.
But that was a big one for us.
So how did you come into this?
The solitary confinement?
The solitary confinement piece.
Well, actually, years ago, I was working with other groups nationally. They were trying to stop solitary in their communities, places like New York, California, New Jersey, Philadelphia. So I traveled with a lot of those people and working on trying to stop solitary confinement in those states. And the last one I remembered was in Philadelphia. One of the legislators put on their first ever public hearing on solitary confinement. And I actually went and testified there. And so years later, like in the last few years, it seemed like Connecticut picked up on solitary confinement. And so, of course, I've been doing it for years with other states. I was excited that Connecticut was picking it up. And so I just started working on solitary confinement, first under my organization, My Brother's Keeper, and then joining up with other groups. One of them huge was the Yale Law School Human Rights Clinic under Hope Metcalf, and we've been working for many, many years. And so, she would always get some students when they come in to sign on to doing some of the work she was doing, and that's how we end up having to form a committee called Stop Solitary Connecticut. And it's students from that clinic and some other religious members and people who've been in solitary who actually suffered behind solitary, and myself as a parent of someone who suffered directly. Because and which is another thing, I make sure that people remember that when someone's in solitary, at least it was for me. When my son was in solitary, I was in solitary.
Yeah.
I would have break out in panic attacks, couldn't sleep at night, have to get up and go to work in the morning, having crying spells, just all of that I went through because I felt like my son was pulling out my spirit. I knew he was suffering. And so it was hard for me. So I try to make sure that when we do this work that we don't forget about those family members who are at home suffering.
And when you say that, how do we get to this point? Why are people put in solitary confinement?
Well, it started out hundreds of years ago with the Quakers, well-intentioned. They felt like if you put people alone in solitude and give them a Bible, they can reflect on their life, what they've done wrong, what they need to change. And so it went from that, like so many things that start out good, and it turned to this pure barbarism, this very inhumane treatment of people. And it all started out, with those good intentions.
Right.
And if you look at who, like say in Connecticut alone, we have solitary confinement is considered 22 hours in a cell. So we have several prisons where people are in the cell 22 hours a day. But the prison that is the most barbaric is Northern, which is up in Somers.
Mm-hmm.
And in that prison, if you look at the percentage of who's in there, over 84% of the people that are held in those harshest conditions are people of color, Black and Latino. And so just to look at that, why is it that these people seem to be so unmanageable that you feel like you have to treat them in these very inhumane manner?
And so what gets somebody in solitary confinement? What's the reasoning?
It could be just a correctional officer that writes a few tickets, because after a few tickets, you're considered what they call chronic discipline, and they could put you in Northern for that. And so it doesn't have to be like they try to say, oh, it's the worst of the worst, the most violent. Right. It really doesn't have to be people like that. Other people that end up in there could be because DOC intelligence says, oh, they're connected to a gang, or they were connected to a gang on the outside. I personally found that information was faulty because they tried to do that to my son, and I had to fight it. And of course, he was pulled out of there. But that's all it really takes. Now, you can get in a fight with someone that could put you in there. Right. So it's not really.
And I think that's what the public is usually led to believe, that it's some type of violent act or some type of erratic behavior that gets you placed in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
There are 80,000 people across the United States who are in solitary confinement.
And the thing about it, by the time they finish torturing them, because according to the international law, having someone in solitude for 22 hours or more is torture. And so by the time you finish torturing them, yes, you may end up with a very violent person because you've caged them like an animal. So imagine caging a dog and abusing that dog and doing it for months. And then one day you open the cage. I mean, do you think that dog is going to come out licking you and wagging his tail?
Right.
No. So you're doing this to a human being. And so that's the hardest part for me to understand, because I know there are some good people out there in corrections. I heard the commissioner not too long ago state that they don't want to close down Northern because it's needed. And that just crushes me to my core. Like, how could anybody think that we need to do this to people? Human beings. Now, either you don't have any humanity, or you don't respect the humanity of a person that you're doing it to. Because there's no way in the world you can reconcile in your heart and mind and soul that you're doing people like this, and you're okay with it.
So what are the other organizations associated with Stop Solidarity?
We have a few that's been signing, and number one is NAACP, and that's very important because of the numbers of who you're most likely going to find in there.
Solitary
we definitely had
yeah.
to bring them on as partners. We have a religious organization, national organization, and before, of course, a national religious organization against torture. I probably got it wrong, but they're a part of our organization. There's ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. And then we have a group of, like I said, people who've survived. I mean, I say survived with quotation mark, survived solitary confinement, and those family members, and bringing in mental health professionals. So there's the groups are really, really growing. That's signing on with us on this ended solitary, because they see the need for it.
So when you say survivor in quotation marks, explain what you mean. We had a discussion about it, but I want you to define that.
I mean, you simply have to look at, what does survival mean when you've been tortured? I mean, do you come out like you went in? Are you the same person that you were when you were before you were tortured? No. Many people during that period of time, especially in places like Northern, they experience auditory and visual hallucinations, sleeplessness, anxieties, some self-harm themselves. There's a lot of PTSD, a lot of health problems. And then if you didn't have mental illness, it's created there. And if you had mental illness when you went in there, it's exacerbated. And then it's a place where some people, the only relief they could find was suicide.
Wow.
So I don't know how you would say survive, because many of those people that we may say survive, if we just talk to them and have them just talk about the experience, you can see in their eyes that something is missing.
It's missing.
Yeah.
It's missing. So what is the community conversation around this issue?
Well, I myself have had quite a few community meetings, especially around New Haven. We're trying to do them around state. I just talked to a woman, a friend of mine who lives in North Haven, who's going to have a house party and try to engage more of the suburban people and rural legislators, because for them it's not happening to their people in their community, just very few. So it's not a hot issue with them. I've had the meetings in New Haven, places like that. Bridgeport, Hartford, those places really that's where a lot of the prison population is driven from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have conversations with people in those organizations and in those communities. And the biggest part is, like, people are, when they hear the stories, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe this, or I didn't know this. But to say that they then get involved in true action is like another whole story.
That's another whole story, because I think for most people, it's not so much that they're not paying attention, but like you said, it doesn't show up on their radar. And nobody is constantly or consistently talking to them about it. Nobody is affected, like you said, in their community. So you might get somebody and say, this is what's happening. So how do you keep them engaged? What is it that you do to make people realize that this is a very serious issue?
Well, for one thing, we've been getting some print media to do some stories on it. And the New Haven Register did one about a month ago, very good story. We've had a press conference on the 23rd of January, and some media did some articles. Some of our articles went out to USA. I think one went to New York Times. So we're trying to spread the information out every 23rd of the month, which we do that because we're signifying that 23 hours held in solitary. So every 23rd, we're going to do another action. I'm doing a solitary confinement panel on Yale next week. And so we're just continually talking to people. But still, the thing is trying to get people, even in those communities that are most impacted, to know what's going on. Because sadly, the people that are tortured come back to our community. Many of them are on psych meds.
Yeah.
And psych meds is another whole set of torture. But a lot of them are on meds, and then a lot of them just to make themselves feel better and try to cope, they start on drugs and alcohol,
self-medicate,
pills, all kind of things to somehow, cope with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then people in the community are seeing, they say, oh, he's all bugged out, or oh, she's all bugged out, but they don't know the story behind that so-called bugged out person.
And I think that's sort of my point. The fact that not enough people still understand the effect of this action. Because like you said, initially it was supposed to be to give somebody some time.
Right.
And, think about the wrong that you've done or the harm that you caused.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody is in this situation for more than a day, it has an effect. Yes. And it's not only the mental, but there's some sensory issues as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Because one of the things, you're not around another human being. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. And then you're in a place where lights are on 24 hours a day. So you hear a lot of loud sounds. So they have a lot of sensitivity to sound. There's so much harm that's being done by that. And doctors will tell you, psychiatrists will say, after just a few days in solitary, people's brains start to function in a whole different way. Mm. And after 15 days, they're saying, and this is what the international community is saying, after 15 days, that person can have brain damage that cannot be reversed. Mm. That's how serious it is.
It is.
And we just don't realize the harm that's happening to our people. And then they put them on antipsychotics drugs. I'm not going to stay on that too long, but that's another nightmare. Mm. And if you check into, do any research on the prisons, there's a huge percentage of the people that in prison are on antipsychotics. And antipsychotics have a lot of side effects to them. And some of those are permanent. Mm. And I mean, it's just a bad situation altogether. And for us to just think that it's okay, we can accept it, or maybe people deserve it, it's horrible.
Yeah, because I think people feel like, well, if they're using it, then that person deserved it. Right. This punishment, this form of punishment, because they've done A, B, and C.
Right.
Or they've disrupted the order of things, mm-hmm. or they're a harm to somebody. Mm-hmm. So they deserve to be locked away from everybody else.
Right.
But if you're telling me somebody is in solitary confinement 2-3 weeks, 6 months, a year,
they may never recover.
They'll never recover from that, right?
Many of them have to function on some kind of antipsychotic all the time just to be able to function on some level. And it's happening to a lot of young people. I was talking to someone today at Voices for Children. I was up in Hartford. Mm-hmm. We had a rally up there. And I was talking to them, and they're looking at joining with us also because we don't talk about the children.
Yeah, the youngsters that are put in solitary confinement.
Right, at Manson Youth. And Manson Youth is already under investigation by the FBI anyway, mm-hmm. because of the way they treat kids. But that's just another layer of solitary confinement where kids are being tortured like that at a very young age. And
now,
the
when
younger
you say torture,
the reason I say torture is because according to international law, if you have someone in solitary for over 22 hours or over 15 days, that's considered torture.
Okay.
And then according to international law, solitary confinement should never be used as a punishment because of the damage it causes. Mm-hmm. They say the only time you use it is if it's someone was in serious harm, might seriously harm another person. Then you need to put them somewhere to get them away from them. But it should never be over 15 days. Now, beyond
and without
that,
human contact, right?
Right. And so beyond that by international law, that's considered torture. And the U.S. signed and ratified an agreement with the international community that these are the minimal, not the best standards of care, but the minimum standards of care for prisoners to do no harm. And every developed nation under that agreement, except the United States, is the only one that's not in compliance.
You're listening to the show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We are streaming live on TuneIn Radio and NewHavenIndependent.org. We're also streaming live video on Facebook Live. Just go to facebook.com/New Haven Independent, or just go to your own Facebook page and look us up. Hey, Bob McCormick. He's always listening. Hope you're doing well, Bob. Happy New Year. Barbara Fair's in the studio, and she has another hat on her head. This time she is dealing with the issue of solitary confinement, and she is part of an organization called StopSolitary.org.
.org, yeah.
And so I noticed that there are 3 things that you all are asking for in regard to stopping solitary confinement. Can you give us those?
Well, number one, we want to shut down Northern. There's just no excuse, no reasoning for a place like that to be open.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing we want to look at is look at the people who are in their cells for 22 hours a day, because that, according to international law, is torture too. So that needs to be addressed. And we have several prisons where people are held in those standards. And then the third one is to look at, there are certain people that should never go in solitary, like young people, because their minds are not developed. You're torturing them before their minds are even developed. Pregnant women, elders, and LBGT.
TQ, yeah.
Q. Those people, they say, should, and how did I forget? And anyone who has a mental illness, because that just exacerbates mental illness.
Yeah, mental illness.
So we want to look at all 3 of those. We actually have the bill that we're putting forth that we've sent a proposal to Judiciary Head, Gary Winfield. It's called the PROTECT Act. And it's not only about protecting prisoners, but it's also about protecting staff. Because we don't think about how staff are harmed by having to be in those conditions.
Yeah. Bob McCormick wants to know, so what do you do for somebody who's released back into society? How do we deal with those people after they've spent part of their time in prison in solitary confinement?
That's a very tough question, because, I mean, if they keep them in there after 15 days and they've already damaged them, I mean, if you can't keep them on a psychiatric antipsychotic medication, I really don't know what else you can do. And who wants to be on an antipsychotic for the rest of their life with all the side effects that happen for that? And especially for young people, because it has sexual side effects. So just imagine you're actually messing all these people up with those antipsychotics. You have people that's on that medication have anxieties. Yeah. That they, restlessness, PTSD, all kinds of stuff. So I don't know the answer to that. I just think that's why we're not asking that we do something better about solitary. We're asking that you end it, because when the people come back to our community, there's not really much we can do.
And they're not receiving any medical treatment.
No. We've actually had people
inside the prison,
right? Well, inside the prison, everything is antipsychotics. From what I'm told, antipsychotics are used just for about everything
while they're in that situation.
Right.
While they're in solitary confinement.
Yeah. And like I said, it's sad when you think about all these young people. They come back out here and they haven't even lived their life. Yeah, and we've done so much harm to them.
Is Northern the facility that is doing this the most?
It's the most harshest form, because these people are like in a little cement cell. They said it's about the size of a closet, and they have a little slit in the door to push food in each day, and that's their whole environment.
No light.
But 23. No, I think they have lights, and they're in there for 23 hours. They get out 1 hour to go to rec, and rec is put your hands through that slit so they can put chains on you, handcuff, chain you up, and put you in another cage. And that's where you get your 1 hour.
That's where you get your 1 hour,
and that's
as
because they
to,
have to give you that. So that's how you get your rec.
And when you say that, most people, myself included, would think that, okay, maybe this person gets to walk around guarded, or they get to go outside and get some air, or
no,
none of that.
No, they're in that cell except when they go to take a shower, and you're chained to the shower. So you're chained like an animal almost all the time that you walk out of that cell.
So what lawmakers do you have to convince that this is inhumane and to get this place closed or to get some kind of action going on it?
Well, like I said, we've had a press conference, January 23rd. We're making calls to legislators. We're having people in their district call them and give them information about a PROTECT bill and that they want them to promote it. We're having the panels, just every opportunity to educate our legislators. But the thing about it, even with the education, you can't legislate a heart to care.
True.
And that's the hardest part. Like, our urban legislators signed right on board because, of course, they know this is the people that are coming from their community. So we have no problem with them. It's the ones in the suburbs and the rural areas who are not that impacted. And so you can't legislate their heart. Yeah. You can't train them to care.
You can't legislate social values.
Yes, it's really, really hard. Like, I was at the Capitol today watching the legislators go by at the General Assembly, and I was just looking at them, and I said, how do I change that heart to care about other people that's not in their district? I called. We were making calls to legislators, and I called one. And the first question was, do you live in his district? And, you don't live in the district, they're not even interested. And the districts that we really need to get the most are where the prisons are. Like up in Enfield, Summers up there. Yeah. Years ago, there was maybe a McDonald's and a grocery store. Right. Now that town is built up, they have everything in it. Because the prison generates brings all that
economics.
Yep. So they're not gonna want to see that end.
Yeah, they don't want it to close. They don't want it to close.
And then I think about, like, we know the correction union's going to be a hard sell. Mm-hmm. Not all, but I know some of them would probably be happy. If we can keep people locked up 22 hours a day, get a nice healthy paycheck.
But is that all that Northern does? It's just not holding people, but they are strictly solitary confinement?
In Northern, yes. In the other places, like I said, like we have several prisons where the people are in there 22 hours a day, but they're not in the harsh conditions.
Right. And they are the
still
harshest.
Against international law by having them in cells that long period of time. And one of the things the new Commissioner Cook, has already said is that he's concerned about how much time people are spending in their cells. So he's trying to work to move them out. But you're going to need the correctional officers in the union to work with you to get that done. Or otherwise, it's going to be tough for him no matter what he wants to do if he's going to get all this pushback from the unions.
The unions, yeah. So the Quakers are a part of this.
Yes, they're actually they're doing a lot of work educating their community, and they've stepped up to the plate. They've come to the press conference and denounced solitary. They made it clear, we thought of this as a good thing, and now it has turned to an act of barbarism, and we don't want any part of it. So they're denouncing it.
So what has been the feedback that you've gotten from the governor on this?
We haven't heard anything from the governor yet. I actually was thinking about that today. I was asking other people, like from the children's group, the youth group. I said, how do you think the governor is going to feel about solitary confinement? You think we might get anywhere with him? And they said they're not really sure. They're just not certain. Like, we hear all about tolls, things
Right,
like that,
right.
but, you know.
Which they, according to you, were getting ready to vote on
Yeah,
today.
they were doing
when
something
you were
there
up
today
there.
because they was in General Assembly and they was flowing in. So I'm assuming they probably were going to make a vote on that. But he's definitely on our checklist of people we have to sit down and talk to and see where he's at. Because like I said, the commissioner, no matter what he wants to do, he's going to need people that's going to support him in doing what he wants to do. Because I really think he has the heart to do the right thing. But he also is going to get that opposition from those people who don't want Northern shut down. And I'm sure the first thing they're going to say is like, what do we do with these people? Well, my thing was, if you never tortured them, you wouldn't have to be worried now. What are you going to do with them?
Happen?
So I'm sure they're afraid of what's going to happen if they let these people out that they've tortured for months and years. You know, it's gonna be a threat.
But it's going to be, but it also is somewhat of a preventative measure, right? In the respect that, you know, these people are coming out. So the first thing I would think somebody would say is, hey, these people need services. What kind of services can we provide them right away?
The only thing would be mental health services. Because I think that's the biggest thing, mental health. And then next to that, I think they need housing, because people are going to feel threatened by somebody who's been tortured and let out into the community. So where are they going to live? So we have to provide housing on top of that. But mental health,
it sounds like, it sounds like maybe these people are released into housing where you have that whole mental health wraparound services type thing.
Yes.
So that way, you know, when people are feeling a certain kind of way, or they really need to talk to somebody, or, you know, just
someone's
the adjustment.
there.
Just the adjustment of going back out and being amongst people. They have that opportunity to, you know, talk to someone right then and there.
Right. And I also think, because I seen a policy that was proposed. I don't know if it was changed, if it was passed, to give correctional officers PTSD benefits. And I understand that, but I also understand that the people who were tortured need PTSD benefits also. So we need to come up with something to help those people that we have harmed. And I know, like,
who are working in those type of conditions, not only the people that are working in them, but the people that are being affected.
Right. Because, like, on the panel, one of the women that I'm going to have on the panel is someone who worked in Northern. I think she couldn't stay there more than about maybe 30 days, I think. I'll have to find out. Because she's a nurse, and she said the things that they wanted me to do, it would go against my Hippocratic oath. So I couldn't do it. So she was thinking about, you know, all the good money she was making, the great benefits and all that. But she said, I had to give it up. But it came
at a cost.
Yeah, I had to give it up because I had to live with myself. And I've heard other people who have done the same thing said they couldn't do it. Especially, I know one woman told me years ago she couldn't do it. Just the fact that seeing our men chained up, it was just too much of a trigger for the institution of slavery, which we claim we're past. And, you know, I'm sure for people who are in that environment, like you said, you know, it's at what cost? You know, you're getting this money, you got great benefits, but you go home with this every day. And that's why there's a lot of mental illness that I've heard, and I've heard people have committed suicide. There's a lot of addiction problems with those people who decided to just stay in it for whatever the reason. Because they have to find a way to cope. Yeah, and it's bad. Like, we talk about, you know, I know the legislators and union people will all talk about public safety. Yes, it is a public safety issue, because when you treat people like we would never be allowed to treat a dog like that unless we arrest it. Right. But when you treat a human being like that, then they're going to be a risk to their own safety, their family safety, the staff that have to work in those conditions, and also the communities that these people come back to. So it's a public safety issue, but it's also a public health issue. It's a public health issue because it creates or exacerbates mental illness. And it has caused people to take their own lives because it was the only relief that they could get from the torture. So we have to look at all that stuff.
Yeah. And figure out, how do we help this community of people?
And how do we treat people with humanity?
Right. Right. So you have a petition.
Yes, we do. And I want people to go on it, go on our website, stopsolitaryconnecticut.org. And there's something you can click on for action. And there's a petition there. We want people to sign it. We want them to share it on all their social media. And we're also going to have a bunch of those printed petitions when we have our panel next Saturday at Yale, so we can get enough signatures that we can bring to the governor to let him know that the commissioner wants to do the right thing. We all need to support him in doing that.
As a resident of Connecticut, the petition says, I call on the state legislature, Governor Lamont, and Commissioner of Corrections Roland Cook to abolish solitary confinement in our state. I pledge to support Stop Solitary CT's campaign to end solitary confinement and close Northern Correctional Institution. I consider solitary confinement to be, quote, a voting issue, end quote, one that will likely affect who I vote for in future elections.
Yes.
And then name, email, mailing address, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very simple and to the point, but it says dismantle the dungeon. So
and that's what they call it. That's what people who had to experience it called it, the dungeon, because they said it's the walls are dark and dirty and damp in there, and you feel like you're underground.
So there's also something called Inside the Box.
Yes.
Experience, educate, navigate.
And that's one of our first campaigns. We started out in 2017 where we actually did get some legislation passed. But with all the stuff that we were asking for, by the time we got it passed, it was so watered down that the only thing we got was an annual report from corrections on who's in solitary and how long they're in there.
Okay, so what did you want? What did it look like initially?
I can't remember because it was so much, but I do remember. It was a lot of the things that I was talking about today, like certain people just wasn't going to go in there, period. Mentally ill kids. Well, we did get past that no one under 18 can go in there anymore.
Okay.
And that was a result of us. We had a replica cell. We brought it up to Hartford, put it at the Capitol. We asked the legislators to go and spending some time in there. And some of them did. So they were convinced. So we wanted that. We wanted to get wellness for the staff members, because we know being in this kind of environment not only affects the prisoners, but it also affects those staff, the people who really care and have a heart.
Yeah.
That would bother them to be in that kind of conditions. What else we wanted? I wish I had the paper in front of me. But there was a bunch of stuff that we wanted, but the only thing we managed to get. I was going to
say, so what did you end up getting?
Yeah, we did get the annual report from DOC on who's in solitary and for how long. And we did get that no one under 18 can go in there. And that's a direct result of my son, who was 17 when he went in there, when they messed him up. And so talking to the legislators, and he testified before the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, and just human rights. And he did all that. He met some of the legislators. Some of the legislators we thought would be really hard. They met my son and they talked to him and they heard his story. And a couple of them actually said they felt so bad that he went through that. They didn't know something like that was going on. So we did get to pass that no one under 18 can go in there. But the reality is that's like a scratch the surface of what we wanted, because we don't feel anybody at any age should be acceptable to torture them.
I think it sounds like they probably need a field trip as a group. To Northern. That's what that sounds like.
And it sounds like they might have to, those who think that we need it,
right?
They might have to sit in there for a couple of hours and see how they feel, because one of the things that one of the commissioners in Colorado did, he actually went into a cell to experience it. And from that, he didn't wait for legislation. He made changes himself. They've made some significant changes in solitary there. New Jersey just passed some huge legislation around restricting solitary confinement. New York has done things. California have done things. Different states have done things. So although we try to believe we are progressive in Connecticut, we're behind in some really good stuff that's going on in other states.
And we know that the reason why they're so slow with it is because of the economics, right? For those towns.
Oh, yes, because I thought you were talking about how much it costs to keep someone in. Because
we can talk about
costs,
that.
Yeah, over $100,000 for each person that they keep in Northern. People should be upset about all that much money being paid. Yeah. And for what? When those people come out, they're broken. Their spirits are broken. Yeah. Their minds are shattered. Yeah. But then you have to wonder, isn't that what they were looking for?
But again, I think the average person thinks that it is just for those 23 hours or it is for 2 days, not 6 months.
Yeah.
Not a year.
It shouldn't even be in there 2 months because like psychiatrists say, after a few days, your brain starts to function different. But after 15, you may never be the same.
So how do you, I mean, you all are doing the work, but, and we may have answered the question way back, but with all the things that you're doing, and maybe you can't answer it right now, but what is it that you see that needs to push this legislation forward to end this?
It's going to take the hearts and minds of people in the suburbs and the rural areas. We already have the urban legislators. So we need those people to care enough to say, you know, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. And stand with us in solidarity and say, shut Northern down, and then find other ways to handle people who are disruptive besides torturing them.
And now, are you planning on, because you did say you're having meetings, but are you planning on going to the town where Northern is and maybe talking to those folks who live there about what's going on?
That's what we've been asking people. If you know anybody in those areas, you know, tell them what's going on. Let's have some house parties out there. We just hired one of the people from our committee as an education coordinator. So that's going to be his job, to go out to these other towns and educate these people and bring them on board with us. So we got a lot of work to do in a very short session, but we're determined. We're determined that this has to end. We don't want to see not another person sent to solitary in those harsh conditions when we shouldn't even be doing it to anyone.
So talk a little bit about next week's conference. Where is it? Talk about your portion of it. You know, how can people join in or at least attend?
It's going to be at the Yale Law School on, what's in the street that you're...
Wall Street.
127 Wall Street. And they just need to go on Yale's
website.
The Rebellious Lawyer Conference and register.
That's the name of the conference?
Yes. It's a 2-day conference, Friday and Saturday, the 14th and the 15th. The panel that I'm going to be facilitating is on the 15th from 1:45 to 3:15. And our guests will include Dr. Kapoor. She worked in DLC. Kebra Smith, who was a nurse. Yes.
Okay.
And Kebra Smith, one of the people who worked in Northern before, she's a nurse. And we're going to have my brother, Harvey Fair, who's a survivor of solitary and Supermax, which Supermax is the harshest part.
And let's talk about Supermax. Tell us about the conference, and then we'll talk about Supermax.
Okay. And then the last person we're going to have is David McGuire from, he's executive director of American Civil Liberties Union. And we've done incredible work with them throughout the years. And so that's going to be our panel. I'm going to show a couple of short videos because sometimes you don't want to just sit and listen to people. Sometimes you get more out of actually seeing stuff. So we're going to show a couple of short videos. And one thing I'm going to promise the community that comes out, there's going to be time for questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to make sure there's at least 20 minutes. So we won't have to ask for a question. And after the second question, say, okay, no more questions. They will be guaranteed to have time to ask questions.
That time.
Yes. And then we'll have some action steps out of there. Like we're going to have some packets to give out to people to take home, and action steps that, who to call, who your legislator is, find your legislator, call them, get people in your community behind it, because we have a short period of time to do some big work, but we're determined that we're going to get it done this year.
Do you have a website that folks can go to?
It would have to be, for any information, it would be under StopSolitary.Connecticut.org, and we have website. On that website, you can see all kind of photos, different events that we've been a part of, the petition, news articles. There's a lot of information on that.
And is there a lot of information, period, about solitary confinement? If somebody just Googled it,
that's what I was getting ready to say. You Google it, you can find loads of, because now it's a trendy thing to talk about. It's like everything else, way back when I was working
sexy.
Before, nobody was talking about it, but now it's sexy. So everybody's talking about it. And it's a move that's going across this nation quickly. So it's like, this is the time to do it.
And to be involved with it.
Yes.
So quickly, tell us about Supermax. Some people have heard of it, but I don't know if people understand what it is and what that term stands for.
Well, Supermax is what they call Northern. It's a prison inside of a prison. So it's much, much more harsh. Just a lot of chaining up of people, a lot of violence, suicide, all kinds of things. Like the first Supermax ever built was Marion, Illinois, and that's one that my brother actually experienced. And people that were been in these places said it's like being buried alive. So that's how bad it is. And so, and they're in that condition for 23 hours a day. So imagine being in this little thing that you feel like you're in a tomb for 23 hours a day.
And Supermax stands for Super Maximum Prison.
Yes. It's
so
like
that's
the most
the
harshest form. And we started out in the United States with one, and that was Marion, Illinois. And I think we have about 47 of them now. So we just getting progressively more insane as a nation.
What do you want people to know about this? Besides signing the petition, what can they do?
I just wanted to know that we need everybody involved. We need the churches. That's another community that is so hard to get on board. We need ministers to step up to the plate and stand with us in solidarity and demand that this place gets shut down. There's got to be people in their community, sitting in their churches, that have been through solitary, that have been destroyed by it, and they're coming there trying to find any kind of way to cope with this. And sometimes they go to the church. The churches need to get involved.
All right.
So that's huge for me.
All right. So that's the next move.
Yes.
That's the next move.
Yes.
So again, tell us when the conference is, what time, where.
The conference is Friday and Saturday. It's an all day for both days. The conference, the panel I'm going to facilitate, called In Solitary Confinement, is going to be on Saturday, February 15th, from 1:45 to 3:15. And people just need to go on Yale Law School Rebellious Conference, go on their website and register. And, there's I think the most charge is $20 to go to both days of the conference. I think it's probably $10, and there may be some exemptions, but, we'll look into at least. I'm at least going to be asking that they allow the New Haven community to be able to go to the conference free, because our community is impacted a lot by what's going on. And if people want to know and don't have the money to go to get that information, I think they should, with all that, they owe the city, that they can let them come in free. So we're hoping that can happen.
Thank you, Barbara Fair. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you bringing us the information and spreading the word. And get a flyer to me or I'll pull something off the page and give you a little bit more publicity next week.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Anytime. Okay. You're welcome here. This is, wherever my radio home is, you're more than welcome to be here.
Thank you.
This is the show on 103.5 FM LP, WNHH, NewHavenIndependent.org. See you next week.
Thank you. I'm trying to spread everywhere I go. We got a lot of work to do before this session ends.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And that's why we had to rally today to let them know you're opening.
I think the more people figure it out,